Well, we started this last week, but could not conclude it because the network was fluctuating. So we're in week 15, and we'll be talking about African polities, African before European invasion, empires and kingdom, European invasion method, then till the end. So now we'll be talking about African before the European invasion. How was African before the European they came to Africa? How was African before the European came to Africa? So before the European invasion and colonization of Africa, which started in the 15th century, the Portuguese were actually the first people to explore Africa. They were the first to come in, they were the first to explore Africa. But before then coming to Africa, Africa has really developed, starting development, civilization started in Egypt. Even most of these European countries were even more, Africans were more civilized than them. Africans were really more civilized than them. So most of all this civilization that these European countries have today, all of them sprout from Africa. Talking about medicine, technologies, everything. So Africa was not really a dark continent, just like the European. They thought that we're ignorance of so many things. A lot of development actually sprang from Africa, starting from the ancient Egypt, where we know we have pyramid and different medicine. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Then from the kingdom to kingdom of Kush, we have different development, even rule, even before when we talk about the pre-colonial system of government, you could see how Africans were actually ruling themselves. You could see how Africa were ruling themselves before European came to Africa. Where actually we have good ruling system. When they came, they were like, okay, let's do it this way, just to favor themselves, not really for our benefit. So there is a lot of development. We also have the Kingdom of Carthage. We have different advanced materials, trade. Ghana Empire, they were known for gold. Mali Empire was also the richest uh, West African continent. Then we have different empires like that down to Ethiopia. So I'm trying to be fast with it because I wasted a lot of time trying to join. So we talk about European invasion of Africa. European invasion of Africa. Now, when you talk about European invasion of Africa, we'll talk about how European came to Africa and how they took over, they share Africa within themselves. And remember, I said the Portuguese were actually the first set of people to come to Africa. They're the set of people to come to Africa. So even after they they exploit, different people were still coming, like the British, they came in like that. So the scramble for Africa is also called partition of Africa, the conquest of Africa, or the rape of Africa. I hope you guys can hear me so that I will not lose grip.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It's also called the conquest of Africa, rape of Africa, invasion, and the rest. So when you talk about, the Berlin Conference of 1884 actually was where they divide African country. It was during that Berlin Conference held that the different African countries were divided. Now, what is scramble? When you talk about scramble, it refers to the condition where people struggle in hurry or in haste to obtain something. That's scrabble. So when different people have started coming to Africa, remember the Portuguese were the first people to exploit Africa, and then British they came, and then they saw different developments in Africa, and they were really very pleased. So they were just in a hurry to just take different parts of Africa. They were just in a hurry to take the different parts or exploit the different parts of Africa. So we talk about Scrabble, which is a condition of people struggling in hurry. Just imagine. Then competing nations trying to defeat or maneuver to overtake their opponent in controlling or getting something from a rivalry. So the Europeans, they were really like just a competition between them on who to take different parts of Africa. Then we also talk about the partition, which refer to the sharing or dividing. When you hear anything partition, it means dividing or sharing of materials within two persons. So that's what they did to Africa. They actually shared the shared African country among themselves. They divided it among themselves. Then we'll talk about partition of Africa, which refer to the dividing up of region in Africa among European power. Among the European power. So you see how these people exploit Africa and what they did. Now we move to the reason for expansion, the reason for European expansion into Africa. What were their reason? Why did why did European actually were after African continent? Now, one of the reason is for economic interest. That's the first and uppermost reason why they came to Africa. It was because of economic interest. During those times, they were actually in need of a lot of raw materials because it was like a competition within themselves, within the European region. They discover, oh, okay, they need a lot of resources, and they felt that other, like the Portuguese, they were already well developed, they have a lot of resources, and they were like, the market was not even enough, they are not gaining enough, and they need enough of materials, they need enough raw materials to actually sell and make a lot of money, because it was like a competition between European people. They were actually competing, who will take this, who will take this, who is the most powerful. So they felt, okay, since this our market is depreciating, things are going down, let's exploit new things. And then that was when they discovered that Africa have a lot of materials, a lot of raw resources, and then they decided to come to Africa. So one of the reasons was for material resources. Then we'll talk about political control. They were actually looking for people to dominate, to rule. They want to control people. So that was one of the reasons. And when they even came, you could see how they were treating the blacks. They were like, okay, they were superiors to them. They felt like we are superiors to the black, so we have more power than them. And then they feel, okay, they are top of the world, and then they could actually rule people, and then people will bow to them. So political reason, political control. The competition in Europe, like I said, the economic interest, the competition within themselves. France, Portuguese, British, they were just competition among themselves actually made them to exploit Africa. The establishment of commercialization, that was a mistake. Supposed to be communication. They established communication so that they can easily communicate with themselves, and because of that, they brought different types of development like phones and the rest, so that it would be easy for them to communicate. And then they created train station, railway, so that it would be easy access for them to um, transport their resources and then communicate freely. The need for security is actually, even though they believe that they were actually superior to African, they were still kind of scared. They need to protect their resources, they need to protect their materials. And for that reason, they actually came to Africa, brought a lot of people to Africa, because they felt, okay, we need people to actually protect our interest here, to protect our resources, to protect our materials, to safeguard us. And then they started bringing people into the country. Different, even though people were not, some European people were actually scared of coming to Africa because the climate and malarias and the rest, but then they were still coming. Then we have the established abolishment of slave trade. Another reason that made them to come to Africa was to abolish slave trade, and that's when the missionaries comes in. Because when the missionaries were coming, their main focus was, okay, we are going to abolish slave trade and then make Africa different, like establish religion. Though even that religion is a way of also like dominating African and making us feel as if they are superior than us, because they brought the idea of different this thing, God, worship God, and maybe our sufferings, we have to accept our suffering because it's when you read about Karma's theory of religion, you understand it better. So they brought missionaries just to abolish slave trade, and that was one of the good things I think they actually did for Africa. And also education, even though the education was just for their own benefit, which we African we still operate till this day. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. The strategies used by the European to acquire colonies in Africa. What were the strategies they used? Signing of treaties. They sign agreement. It's an agreement between two entities. Like, okay, we want this, so you have to agree to this. That's it. So it was an agreement between two entities, and that agreement, it has to be signed by what those in charge, like the elders. They have to agree and then they sign. Aside then, they also use military conquest, because they feel, okay, if signing of treaty does not work, they have to use force. To say, okay, we want this by force, and that's when they start beating or putting some persons inside prison. Especially they do that to the educated elite, and then they use diplomacy, peaceful negotiation. That is diplomacy. Come together to say, okay, we want this. Let's negotiate. Peaceful negotiation. Then we have trickery. This trickery is that they lure African people with their different resources they brought. They lure us with different resources like dry gin, tobacco, maybe things that Africans don't really have, and them seeing them be like, okay, this is really nice, and then they will just, okay, take this and give us your land, take this and give us this place. So they were really using those things. They will have different companies rule. They have missionaries, like I said before, missionaries, they actually came for not only to even stop slave trade, but because most of the missionaries, they acquired a lot of lands. They acquired a lot of, like, you could see missionaries when they come like this, you don't even need to buy lands. People will willingly give them to you and say, okay, I'm donating this land to the missionaries, and you could see them acquiring a lot of lands. And aside even acquiring a lot of land, they were also taking different resources from the land, So that's it. I will talk about factors that led to scramble and partition of colonies in Africa. What are the factors? Like I earlier explained, economic reason. That's the highest. Again, we have political reasons, which I've explained. Social reasons, which I've also explained. The impact of partition in Africa. What are the impacts? Now, the partition of Africa had several effects to both African and European as follows. Even though they came and they came for exploitation, to dominate, rule us, they still brought good things to us. They still brought good things. They benefit, and we also benefited from them. So one of the things that they actually did that makes sense, that's really more beneficial to us, was the abolishment of slave trade. The missionaries, they came to abolish slave trade. So that was one thing they did that was far much more interesting, because the abolishment of slave trade. Then another thing was the drawing of boundaries in Africa. They created different boundaries in Africa. Sharing the different continents and the rest. Then different communities and the rest. Then spread of Christianity. They actually brought Christianity. They brought Christianity to Africa. So that's another benefit. Then another thing was introduction of Western education. Though the main reason why they brought Western education was not really to give us education, mind you, was not really to say, okay, we're giving these people education so that they will be educated. They were doing it because coming to Africa, we don't understand their language. They don't understand our language, isn't it? So they need us to be educated so that we will be communicating, and then they will also use us to work for them. They will employ us and they will be working for them. It's not for us to develop ourselves, but for us to be under them and work for them. Don't know if you understand. The improvements in agriculture, a lot of improvement came in, like they brought in new materials which African people maybe they don't really have, but at least they brought those like different materials that will aid agriculture, that will make it more easier for the people. Then some communities were split into different countries, like drawings of boundaries. So communities were actually split, mm, like that. Then we'll talk about the apartheid period. Hmm. The apartheid period. The apartheid period, that is in South Africa. If you're talking about apartheid period in South Africa. So the apartheid period refers to a time in South Africa that's from 1948 to 1994, when the government led by the white minority, mainly Afrikaners, institutionalized a system of racial segregation and discrimination. So what was apartheid? Apartheid is an African word meaning apartness. Apartness, that's apartheid. So it was a set of law and policies that physically and socially and politically separated races. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I want to be sure because the last time I was thinking you guys were still there. So that's it. So um when you talk about apartheid period, you just see these are just racial segregation. Guess for those people that are doing literature, you read about it a lot, especially in this African novel that they gave to them. What is it called? Mind Boy. You see those discrimination. People were actually pain. People were suffering because they were actually ruling them, and they were trying to. You could understand those pain, and then the people that actually fought for the freedom of Africa were mainly students, and one of the person that is well known in South Africa is Nelson Mandela, which was the first president in Africa, and he fought for Africa. He fought for peace. He fought for peace. So when you're talking about the history of Africa, of South Africa, you must always mention Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, a freedom fighter. So when you talk about that apartheid period, it was not as Africa, it was not as Nigeria. Theirs was really very, very, very terrible. Theirs were really very terrible because they went through a lot. They went through a lot. They fought and the rest. So major features of apartheid: popular registration acts, group areas, all these things will actually drive towards freedom of South Africa. They will actually drive towards freedom of South Africa because most of them were not even given proper education. The white people were dominating almost everything. Their lands, bought their land. Just only few persons were actually enjoying few benefit, and those people that enjoying is all those people that just like they want to behave like the white. They want to live the white life. I don't know if you understand. But aside that, many things were actually denied. Like Africans were denied of many. They were not even no good job, no good education. Freedom of press was not even in existence. Everybody was just there, just trying to go. All these features, all these group area, pass law, all these were actually like drive kind of towards freedom. When you talk about past law, movement control, I think it's um it's like a black South Africa had to carry like passbook that contain personal details, their work history, and permission to be in white areas because movements were actually restricted. Movements were restricted. So without a pass, I don't know if you've heard about that pass laws. I don't know if this is your first time of hearing it, but that pass laws, they were like you carry the pass. You see how they were treated. Individuals were arrested or fined if they don't have that. So movements were actually restricted. So it's like they carry this book, pass book all around. So it contains their personal details, their work history, and then their permission to be in white areas. Like you live in their own country, but in some areas you see African just there, then in some other area whites are there. So for you to go to that white area, you need a passbook. You need a passbook. So these were all these most of the features apart from all these things that because even education was not there, prohibition of mismarriage, they don't even allow African to get married to white because it look as if they're not well respected. Then also African response to European colonization. What was their response to European colonization? What were the African response? Now, African response to European colonization was that there was resistance from across different parts of the continent by various group of people. Now, resistance, war and military resistance. Sometimes these include attempt to draw upon supernatural solution to avoid or to undo conquest. You know, we have a military conquest. So supernatural power, they were really like trying hard to resist these European, this African colonization. Then acquiescence, agreement or consent without protest. No protest, just peaceful agreement, silence, and passiveness over an extended period of time. Alliance, sometimes it was possible to join with the European in conquest of neighbors, often traditional enemies with whom they had long been in conflict with. Then negotiation, like that, sometimes they negotiate with the Europeans. So it's then what is neocolonialism? Now, when you talk about colonialism and neocolonialism, they are two different things. When you talk about colonialism, it means the Europeans they were ruling us directly, but mainly for economic exploitation. Then when you talk about neocolonization, they were actually ruling us indirectly, which means after independence, they still rule us. So yeah, it said it's defined as the indirect control of economic, political, and socio-cultural life of colonized country by their former colonial masters. Unlike colonialism, which was direct, controlled, neocolonialism operates indirectly and secretly. I don't know if you understand. Socio-cultural life, we still have that mentality of I want to dress like the white. We see them as they are pretty with the way they dress, and we abandon our culture, the way we dress, and see ourselves like we are like we are like not really civilized with the way we dress, and their way is more civilized than our own way, our own cultural life, because they dress really do a lot of different their cultures, the way they do their things, and we want to buy those ideas into our own culture. Then even politically, during those different crises, if you watch some movies, you will see that even sometimes the politicians they still negotiate with the European people and they rule us indirectly. Economic exploitation, we still rely on them. Like we need goods, we cannot produce our things ourselves and say, okay, we produce this and we want to sell it to make money within Africa. We still rely on importing goods from outside the country. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, am I making sense or
Yeah, you're making sense.
yeah, so that's it. So they just feel like that mentality is still there. Then how does neocolonialism really manifest? Like I said, economic dependence, we still depend on European. We export a lot of things. We import we import a lot of things to our country. And within African, like we said, we have this thing for African where we want to unite the whole Africans. And yet we're not even united. Like the present happening now in Ghana, we're asking Nigeria to leave Ghana. And then there we have different white people that are still in Ghana. We have Chinese people. We have but they will not ask them to leave. And they're asking, so where is the peace there? And we want to unite Africa. We want Africa to be one. And yet we don't want each other in our countries. I don't know if you understand that enmity, and they want to unite Africa. We cannot. So most time, instead of us to depend on ourselves within Africa country for our natural resources, we depend on different outside the European country to be bringing goods for us, and then we feel their own is the best, is better than what we have. So economic dependence, then cultural domination. Like I said, we still want to behave like them. We still want to act. We don't want to develop our own self so that them too will look into our culture, and they love our culture. If you look into it, like especially when they do really love our cultures, because there are different cultures we have that European people really envy that they do not have. Our culture is so beautiful. The different culture in Africa. If you travel around Africa, you will know that culture is beautiful. But then we just tend to just, oh, their own is more. We see those because of the way, and we want to buy those ideas. We want to inculcate it. We want to live like them. Then the educational system is based on colonial model. Like I said, when they brought education, they did not really bring education because they want to favor Africans. They brought education because they wanted African to work under them. They wanted to control them. They wanted to employ them, and they pay them little token because they feel they are not worth it. So that educational system is still dirty now. If you go to other countries, you see children age of 6, they are making projects. They are producing things. Like you see a child and say, we have a project, we science project, and I have to create this. They'll take it to school and then start analyzing how they create it. Those kind of people, if they even finish school with hard job, they can be self-employed because they can produce a lot of things, they can make a lot of things, especially in China. But coming to Nigeria, we carry fire all the time. Like after school, we are not even self-employed. We carry file looking for job because that's the kind of education that the master they've given to us, like because they want us to be under them, they want to control us, and because of that they give us a kind of education that when we finish we'll bring our file and then they will employ us. And now they've gone, we are still using that system. That's why I say education system based on colonial models. We're still in that system. You cannot go to a primary school and you see children outside. What's the thing they will ask you? The highest thing they will ask you to do is to mold a clay or mold one thing or do one small art. Mostly, sometimes in science class, you see them actually still producing some kind of instrument, but not really that. Just to say assignment, do this project, and the rest of things you just be copying and copying. So we are still like all these things, they are neocolonialism. They are all neocolonialism. So that's it. Then we'll talk about the nationalist movement in West Africa. Nationalist movement in West Africa. Nationalism is the African context may be defined as the struggle by Africans to free themselves from foreign rules and to determine after independence has been won their own future. That's nationalism. The struggle for Africans to free themselves from foreign rules and after independence determine how their future will be. So in the period before the Second World War, nationalism was aimed at resolving certain grievances of the elite. The nationalists demand better prices for agricultural commodities and fair treatment for African business persons, merchants in the competition with Europeans who dominated the economy. Now, African also wanted representation in the Legislative Council that usually has European majority. Like when you come to Clifford Constitution, Richard Constitution, the only constitution that Nigeria were fully like that they fully participated in their own making was not really fully. I will not say it's fully because the European were still there. Was in Macpherson Constitution because they gave autonomy to different regions. But then the Legislative Council was really, really dominated by the Europeans. They made decisions, almost all the decisions in the country. Can you hear me?
How was your day?
So they make decisions, major decisions were made by them.
How was
So
your
Africans, so Africans, oh,
Where else?
please stop distracting me.
I say where else?
So Africans were not really, so they were not happy with this and they have to fight for their freedom. So what is nationalist movement? Nationalist movement is different from nationalism. Nationalism is a struggle for Africa to free themselves from European control and they determine after independence their future. But nationalist movement is the coming together of various ethnic groups to force colonial government to grant independence to their empires. Though various cultural groups had diverse belief and custom, but they were able to combine forces to fight the colonial power using the elites at front. That's nationalist movement. Not now that we have different ethnical differences. So the elites did not only provide the leadership, they coordinate, organize, and sometimes confronted the colonial masters with genuine reason why they should be given independence. Therefore, nationalist movement can be defined as an association of people with common interests who organize themselves to resist political and cultural domination and engage in struggle for independence. That is nationalist movement. They came together, different ethnic groups to drive out colonialism. Then we have the nationalist movement in British West Africa. These were actually the groups that were created by these different ethnical group and educational elites. Different groups and educational elites because they believe, okay, if we want these people to live, we have to create this, we have to create that, we have to create this, we have to create that. So they created the National Congress of British West Africa. I think it was founded in 1939. I'm not so sure, but you can do your research. So their main aim was actually to fight for free press, for schools, universities, different schools, for natural for infrastructure, social amenities. That was just their aim, and for political parties. Then we have the West African Students Union. Those were the people that were studying outside Nigeria, outside they were studying were studying outside country. Different African students, they came together to form this West African Student Union. Then we have Nigeria Youth Movement. Nigeria Youth Movement. The youths in Nigeria, they came together to form this Nigeria. I think they were part of the first political parties that they contested with NNDP and won. They won. I think they won up to like 5 seats. Can't remember, but they actually that was the first political after NNDP. I think all these people that was 1923, 24, 25, down like that. Then we have Pan-Africanism just to unite the whole African continent, so that they can fight for their freedom. Yeah, method used by nationalist leaders in their struggle against British administration. What did they use? They used newspaper articles. The first newspaper that was created was in Nigeria was in 1923. That was the Lagos Pilot newspaper, but they also created different um newspaper. Like they publish different articles fighting. Most of the articles that will be there is just for freedom. They speak out, and freedom of press. That was what the National Congress of British West Africa, they were fighting for, freedom of press. People should be free to express themselves. And most of these things were written in articles, published in the newspapers. Strike, boycott, and protest. These were also what they use. Protest. Like most time, if you watch the history of South Africa, you see most of the students coming out to protest, and a lot of them were killed. A lot of them were killed. They were fighting for freedom. We have seminars, symposium, different seminars were held, different symposium, constitutional conferences were held, where the African want to make their own constitution. They want to be involved in their own policies making. Then political party, of course, that was the major drive towards independence of the different country. That was a major drive. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that was a major drive. Then we move to factors that promoted nationalist activities in West Africa before World War II. So what promoted the nationalist activities, what really made these people to say, okay, we want our freedom, was exclusion of Africans from economic activities. They were not included in any economic activities. The Europeans were just dominating everything, monopoly in economic. They were just dominating everything. They were in control of everything. And then Africans were not happy about that. Then unemployment, most of the educated elite, those people that were well educated, even while they were well educated, the Europeans, they will still be afraid of some, and they're scared. And then they employ just only few. Employ only few. So employment was not there. They were suffering, and yet they are educated. So they needed their freedom. And the role of ex-slaves, they were slaves that were in the European kingdom, those people that were in the different European countries, they were like, when they came back to Africa, because when they were there, they see how the European, they live their life, they see how they operate, they see how they rule, and then coming back to Africa and see that they are just dominating everything. They were like, let's fight towards this, because in their country, this is what they have. Why can't we also have our own self freedom? That was so their roles also actually helped in the nationalist movement. There's discrimination in public service, like I said. There were lots of discrimination, especially if you're a black and white. The same opportunities are not really given to the black. So the discrimination was too much. It was too much. Then the educated elites, like I said, they were educated, so they know their rights. They know their rights since they were actually educated. And so because they were actually educated and they know their rights, they have to fight for it. So they were actually part of the factors that promoted the nationalist movement. Then we have factors that affected the rise and growth of nationalism after the Second World War. Development in Asia. Now, like for example, India, they got independent. So Africa saw that, if India can gain independence from these European people, why can't we do the same? If other countries in Asia can gain independence, why can't we do the same? And therefore, they wanted their own freedom as well. The activities of students abroad, those students abroad, they were actually educated. They saw the way they lived their life, and then they came to different those people, even though they were from different countries. You could see how those heroes, they really fought hard for independence. Unlike now, we don't value what they did. We still hate each other, but they came together. And then discrimination in the civil service, like I earlier said, discriminations, whites, different. They don't give them the same opportunities because you are black, because of your skin. If you are black, you're not given opportunities. The establishment of political parties, different political parties, especially the NNDP that was established in Nigeria. And while political parties were actually growing in Nigeria, There were some countries that, like in South Africa, they were still under those French people. So they hardly even, because you see how they live their life. Unlike the British, they were a little bit lenient with us because they even promoted education, they put different infrastructure. But then in South Africa, it wasn't even like that because theirs was terrible. Education was not even encouraged, not to talk of national political parties. But then in Nigeria, the political parties were one of the major drive towards independence. Then we have the exclusion of Africans from the economy, like I earlier explained to the same thing. So we talk about now. We'll talk about human rights. Human rights. That's the next thing. Human rights. So when you talk about human rights, what is human rights? Human rights are universal and apply to everyone. Human rights, it's universal and it's what? It's applied to everyone. So they establish that all human beings, irrespective of your country, culture, context, are born free and equal in dignity and right. Whether you are an Igbo, you are Yoruba, you are Hausa, you have equal rights. Equal rights. That's then we'll talk about fundamental human rights. What is fundamental human right? Fundamental human right can be referred to as those inalienable, which is natural rights. Natural rights and privilege is enjoyed by the citizens in a what? In a given countries. In a given country. In a given country. That's then it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that its citizens enjoy these rights. Are we really enjoying the right? Yes, everybody has freedom to do whatever they like. But though, even though you have freedom to do whatever you like, it's still restricted. It's still restricted. Does not mean you have entire freedom to start doing rubbish because you have freedom to do whatever you like, then you will start misbehaving. No. So now we talk about types of human rights. Types of human rights. When you talk about types of human rights, we talk about the social, we talk about the natural right. What is natural right? Natural right is right that is kind of inherent, not kind of, it's an inherent thing, something um that you are born with, that everybody will enjoy. So that's your natural right, something that you have to enjoy yourself. You are born inherent. Everybody have freedom to word of speech. You can talk. Nobody's holding you to talk. To enjoy different different natural resources. Different natural resources. Then we have the civil rights or social rights. You have freedom to associate, to move around. That's your social right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, thought my network has. Okay. Then we have political rights. You have the right to vote and be voted for. You have right to vote and be voted for. So nobody should stop you from voting. In as much as you are of age 18 years and above, you have the right to vote. Then also we have economic rights. You have the right to own a property, to sell, to do whatever you like. Like this social civil right, you have the right to own a land. Economic right, you have a right to own a place. You have a right to gain access to any natural resources you want. Not really natural resources, because anything you want, you have the right, like your to buy, to sell, you have the right. Then legal rights. What's the legal right? You have the right to, if you feel your right is being trampled on, you have the right to sue. You feel, oh, my right has been trampled on, and I want to sue this person to court for doing this to me. You have the right to sue, and you can also be sued. But outside that, I think there are people who enjoy the immunity. Like, you cannot go and sue the president. You wait for him to just finish his tenure before you actually feel, okay, I want to sue Mr. President for doing this. You cannot just. So even though we have the right to sue, there are some people who enjoys this privilege. I don't know if you understand. There are people who enjoy privilege. Then we have limitation to fundamental human rights. How can these rights be limited? The rights can be limited. The life of an individual may be taken when he commits an offense. The life of an individual can be taken when he commits an offense. Like, if you kill someone, you can be sentenced to what? Death by hanging, or you will still be killed. Then the freedom of religion or belief may be restricted when the individual refuses to obey the law of the state. You cannot, because you are a Christian, then disobey the law of the state. You will still obey. You still have to obey. Then we have, if an individual form or join or operate an illegal association, his freedom or association may be limited. Then the freedom of movement of any individual may be limited. And the rest, if may be limited if he commits an offense, you can be arrested and detained.